are live. Cliff Gray from Flat Top, or was it Flat Top Wilderness Guides?
Yeah.
I want to get that. Okay, cool. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, of course, man. Thanks for having me.
So where exactly are you guys located in Colorado? You're in Colorado, right?
Yeah. So most people, the closest town they associate with this area is Vail. So
Okay.
Vail, Colorado. I actually live in one of the neighboring towns, Eagle. But most people that have come here for skiing and stuff, that's where they can relate to is Vail.
Okay. Gotcha. Yeah, because I went to the University of Colorado, so I've been through that whole
Okay.
I have a friend, she's got a place out, and well, her father is a photographer and they live in Estes, but his studio is in Granby. So
Okay.
whenever I'd go skiing at Winter Park, it's like a studio apartment. So I would stay there, so it's kind of convenient. Yeah. I miss Colorado.
Sure. Yeah.
I miss Colorado a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you got plans to move to the Mountain West anyway. So
yeah, I wanted to move back to Colorado, but it seems like it's getting really crowded. Every time I go back, the Denver area and stuff, and you go to Boulder and then the few times I've hunted and I start calling in more guys than elk, I'm just like, oh man.
Yeah, I mean, Colorado's got so I kind of have a mixed history with Colorado. I was born here. I was born just down the road from where I live right now. But I went and lived other places and came back. And yeah, it's changing rapidly, Not only, like the mountains are turning more into the Front Range, and the Front Range is turning more into California.
It seems to be that way in a lot of states. The Californication of, Austin is getting, because all the tech people from San Francisco are moving to Austin.
Yeah. Between the tech guys and Joe Rogan, they'll have that.
Yeah, the way Joe Rogan, come out. Yeah, go Austin, because I'm leaving Texas. Come to Austin, please. So anyways, how long have you been guiding? When did you start your outfit?
Yeah, so I started the one that I currently own. This will be my 9th season. Okay. My dad was an outfitter when I was a kid, and he was a cattle rancher too. And back in the 80s and 90s, those two professions tended to go along with each other. Most outfitters were also ranchers or cattle guys or whatever, because they were already working on the forest anyhow, and they had the horses and all of that. So I have some background in it from that. But my current business, I think this will be my 9th season.
Nice. Do you have access to private land as well? So if someone comes to hunt with you, you got public land as well as like private land they can hunt on too?
Yeah, so I do probably 90% of my stuff is in a wilderness area. It's in the Flat Tops Wilderness. And then I do probably 5 to 10% of my stuff is on private. I do a little elk hunting, little deer hunting on private, and then I do a fair amount of bear hunting on private.
And Colorado has spring bear, right?
No, we don't. So all the bear hunting we're doing is spot and stock stuff in early September.
So the bears are nice and fat and full of good food, hopefully, and taste really good. So when guides, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. No, I was just going to say the bear hunting is kind of underrated, to be honest with you, particularly if you're in good areas and that sort of thing.
I'm actually looking forward to it. That's one of the since there's spring bear and then turkey season also, they kind of coincide in Montana.
Sure.
I want to try. I've never hunted bear, and then after doing this podcast and finding out, I've told a story about my father growing up. Always told me bear, you can't eat bear. It's bad.
Yeah, sure.
And so whenever I'd see people hunting bear and taking a picture, I'm like, what? What are you gonna do with it? You're just gonna use the skin? Because I had a brainwash into me. You couldn't eat bear. Since doing this podcast, I've heard more good things about bear meat, and some people say it's their favorite game meat.
Right. I mean,
try it.
I mean, I'll be transparent with you, David. Like, it's not my favorite meat, but I for sure consider it edible, and it's good. You've got to be careful about how you cook it and stuff.
Right.
But a lot of that, different game meat deal, it's super cultural, because I notice even I've spent a fair amount of time in British Columbia, and like in British Columbia, those guys will not touch lion meat. Whereas in Colorado, everybody eats lion meat. You know what I mean? And I would consider it pretty good too. But just it's amazing how you could be in different areas, and the perspective on certain game meat can be like totally different.
Yeah, this was in upstate New York, long time ago.
Okay.
But now there's bears all
Yeah,
over there.
sure.
But growing up, when we were near the Pennsylvania border, and there were tons of bears on that side. But occasionally you'd see them, and now they're seeing them all the time. My sister hasn't been there for
Yeah.
years and stuff. I've never seen a bear. I've never seen a bear
Have
in
you
the
never
wild.
seen one?
Ever. All the times I've been hunting in
Dude.
Colorado, Montana, Utah, Idaho, I've never seen a bear.
Yeah. Well, just that alone, man, is the reason for you to go hunting for them. Because I guide quite a few of the hunts, and they're one of my favorite species just to watch, because a lot of times they're in like a family unit. Obviously, we don't hunt sows with cubs, but watching sows with cubs is pretty damn cool. How they protect their cubs. They'll stick them up a tree while they go feed. Just all those things, pretty neat.
Do you watch Meat Eater Ranella show?
I do. I'm not caught up on recent episodes, but I've watched
I
them.
just watched. Yeah, I just watched the recent one, and he and his buddy was bear hunting, and he was turkey hunting. This was in Montana, and they had a boar. I think they said he was like 300 or so yards away, and they had a wind at their back. They thought they were safe, and they're glassing them, and all of a sudden you see that boar go like this, and he raises his nose up, and just bolts.
Oh,
And
yeah.
And they're guessing they smelled them, and they were said 300 yards away. And
Yeah.
they were really surprised. They figured the winds would be swirling, and he's just sitting there feeding, and all of a sudden you just see him raise his head, and he lifts his head up, and he's like sniffing the air, and then just looks around and just bolts.
Yeah, it was out of there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, they that's another thing about them. I mean, in the fall, well, in the spring, particularly when I've hunted them in the spring in Canada, early when they just are waking up, they're almost a different species than when they are in the fall. When they're just waking up, they're not dumb, but I would say they're so concerned about eating and going out and hitting the fresh grass that their guard's kind of down. In the fall, they're a little smarter.
These are usually food sources. Do you find them when you spot and stalk them most of the time?
Yeah, so I that's all I focus on is food sources. So in September, when we're hunting for them, generally what I do is, after like a few days of hunting, you're going to know exactly what they're hitting, right? And once you get good at it, you'll know like what good acorns look like, what good berries look like to a bear. And then you just find those feed sources and find a good spot where you can glass a lot of that, and you'll find bears. It's all about knowing the feed sources. If a guy's bear hunting and he doesn't know, what a good acorn patch looks like, what good berries look like, he's going to waste a ton of time. Like he could waste 95% of his time. And that's probably, like you said, you haven't seen them. I'm sure you've been in like good bear areas.
Oh,
But
yeah.
if you're hunting elk, you're probably just one elevation rung above them or below them or what, and you're not, like most guys are not hunting oak brush patches for elk. You know what I mean?
Right.
That sort of thing. So you just happen to be in a different spot. But if you don't like that rule of 5% of the territory holds 95% of the game, with bears is probably even more extreme. Like if you get the right spots and the best patches of feed source, you'll see a bunch of them.
Sweet. How about elk? Have you noticed? It seems with social media, especially the past couple of years, and Rogan talking about all the time. Have you noticed a real spike in elk? People wanting to hunt elk.
It's probably hard for me to gauge, David. We always stay booked. We're capacity limit. I can only take so many
Right.
hunters due to how my permit is and stuff. So I don't notice a huge difference. I would say there is the difference that I see is on the archery front. There's more guys bow hunting them, and there's more guys that are really well equipped. on the gear front, but also just mentally. You know, the
Yeah.
elk hunters have changed drastically. I mean, anybody who thinks otherwise is kind of kidding themselves. I mean, when I was a kid, there was no such thing as these guys going on 10-day backpack hunts, living out of their backpack. That really didn't exist. Like there might have been a few guys doing that, but it wasn't a thing. That's like that's a trend that has drastically changed archery season, I think.
And so do you provide, you go from the full deal, like a lodge, meals, everything, to all the way just dropping guys off and hey, we'll see you in 5 days, hunts like that, like so where they'll guide
Yeah.
themselves, you just take them out?
Yep. So we do, I mean, we do the whole spectrum, you know, David, but I would say it's 90% of it split between two services. One is the drop camps where we pack you into, you know, a foot or horseback only accessible area. You know, there's no roads in the area. We pack you in there and we have the equipment and the wall tents in there. We drop you off and then you're on your own. Obviously, you know, for packing out deer and elk and bears, we come and do that for you. We come in and just do the logistics, but the hunting, all of that, you're on your own. And then the other end of the spectrum, the fully guided stuff, we do that also. Some years I do it out of camps that are remote, and then some years I do it out of our lodge. Just kind of depends on logistics that year, the dates of the seasons. There's a bunch of different variables.
No, I should also make note that a few things that I've read about in your bio is that you're uh will like the EMT for wilderness. What do they call that? So you're wilderness.
A first wilderness first responder.
Yeah, first responder. So you're
Mhm.
certified in that, correct? You got that course, and so you know how
Yeah,
to
yeah,
take
yeah.
care of people. Okay.
Yeah, and that's a good course for anybody wanting to, you know, be safer in the mountains
Yeah.
or in a remote environment, you know.
Yeah, no doubt. How about and then you're a pilot, which is cool because I'm a pilot as well. What
Oh,
do you
cool.
what's your rating? What do you have?
Yeah, just single engine land.
Really?
So yeah, how about you? Well, you're a commercial pilot?
Yeah, I've helicopter and
Oh,
multi.
cool.
Yeah. But I
Cool.
started out in airplanes and then I wanted to do helicopter and uh got that, but I'd already had all my fixed wing, single, multi, and then just did add-on, so it doesn't cost as much. So I just
Yeah.
got the rating add-on, and so I already had my private, so I just had to do a few things different for helicopter, and then same thing. I do private, instrument, commercial, and then I did
Sure.
CFI and helicopter. But so do you use the plane at all to do a little scouting, or is it just do you have a plane or you rent a plane?
So I don't just rent them, and then I've got, you know, I would say that in terms of, you know, scouting with an airplane, in my view, David, you've got to be in the areas that we hunt. I mean, you've got to be like a highly proficient mountain flyer because of the altitude, you know.
True.
And I would say that my personal level, like I'm learning, you know what I mean? So
Okay.
I generally, if I'm, you know, scouting an area from the perspective of like, you know, just knowing how to get around it. I'm not necessarily like looking for wildlife. I still tend to have somebody with me, you know, locally here who's a, you know, a mountain flying instructor or whatever. I've got a couple buddies who are. So I usually go with them just so I got a little more expertise in there. But in terms of the question of scouting, so everywhere's got specific rules about scouting out of an airplane. Obviously, you live in the epicenter of like no rules in terms of that stuff. But in Colorado, we have some rules we have to follow. In order to kind of just not even get close to any of those rules, usually my scouting for wildlife is all done before the season, way before the season. I will do some of it, particularly like sheep hunts, and I don't know the unit real well, you know, or if like I just feel like, you know, a group of rams could get hidden somewhere or whatever, I'll fly it with guys so I know how to get around. You know, there are times that we do look for animals at the same time. Probably 90% of that though is like really rugged country where I'm trying to figure out how to get around with it. I would say the flying though is more of a hobby for me, and it's not a significant part of my like my professional existence, you know.
I like that you stressed right away that your comfort level, because you could just say, "Hey, I'm private." You could take guys out, and you're still not, you're just pushing it when you know your comfort level and
Oh
you're not
yeah.
comfortable at that altitude. So that's very, and people should take note of that. That's a safe guy right there. He's actually thinking, not being selfish and for the money aspect. Because I imagine guys who get to private and, like you said, a high altitude
Yeah.
flying is a lot different. Air's thinner, fuel, everything. So, and I liked
Oh
how you
yeah.
said that, because I'm a flight instructor too, to hear you say, my comfort level is just not there. So
Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, and it's easy to find guys that are around here that are experts in it, and I like to learn from them, and all of that. But some of the areas we fly to are kind of new to them also, because and so I think it's nice to and the other thing is, particularly when you're looking for wildlife, like you can't be, I mean, people who fly and look for wildlife at the same time, like, I mean, I'm not going to judge people's choices, but to me it seems insane, because I mean, to be looking at the ground while you're trying to fly is a bit
yeah.
much, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Oh, especially in an airplane. A helicopter's a little easier because you got the big bubble in front of you, you can see everything. But if
Yeah,
you, depending on the aircraft, if you got low wing, you have to move a lot. Yeah, I can totally
yeah,
where,
yeah,
yeah. Now, how about
yeah. But
what?
no, I was gonna say, man, I could get the helicopter bug. I've flown in them a few times down in Texas, and I could see how you went that route.
Yeah, you're definitely, the airplane you can do autopilot. You can't do that. You actually
Yeah,
have to fly, the helicopter, because you have to use both right and left hand
yeah,
and your
yeah,
feet and everything. I mean, I would suggest anyone just go on a discovery flight, whether it be airplane or helicopter, and just go out and they'll let you take control. And next thing you know, you're like, man, it's the only problem is the cost. That's the thing that
yeah. Oh yeah,
sucks.
yeah, yeah. Well, what's your philosophy on? I mean, for any, I mean, because I think it's kind of because I have a certain philosophy about like the training of that stuff, um, and so I'd love to hear yours. But for me, it was always like, if you're gonna do it, like dedicate your life to it, for if you can, like just try to pound it out, because like the learning curve is shortened if you just if you take one lesson every week, that's totally different than taking four in a week. Like you're gonna the information compounds and the knowledge so much more rapidly, and so I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, see, I had the VA paid for mine, so I
Okay.
had to. So in order to get them to do that, it has to be through a accredited university or college that has a degree
Okay.
program. So I have
Sure.
to go. So my training was all based on the curriculum for that
Yeah.
semester, and then the flying part always went past the semester, because especially when I was first doing it, airplane, I had the hardest time learning to land. It was
Oh,
just, for
really?
some reason, now I know it's all about airspeed and
Sure.
angle, coming in, but for the longest time I could not. Now I can grease it, man. If you give me a spot, I'll put the freaking plane right there. And
Yeah, yeah, sure.
helicopter helicopter's more it was more intensive, because like I said, you're actually flying, you got to know about auto rotations, engine failure. And if you have a good instructor, it doesn't matter, airplane or helicopter, and I had a guy who was also a mechanic for helicopter, so he would explain to me, because some guys would say, engine failure, you think engine failure when you first heard engine failure in a helicopter, you're like, what? And he's like, dude,
Yeah.
listen, that engine is not just going to go puh and just fail. He says you're going
Yeah,
to hear
sure.
it wind down, because when you practice it, you have a tendency to rush everything. And he said, dude, just slow it down, because that's how it's going to happen. It's just going to go, so just wind down, because you have to take a throttle, and
Yeah.
when you cut the power, you yaw, so you got to correct that yaw, and then you also have to maintain your RPMs, or else your blades droop down. They call it droopy
Yeah.
dick. It looks like
I
a
got
droopy
you.
dick, and then you literally fall from the sky. Centrifugal force, all that stuff. And
Sure.
so, anyways, yeah, if you can take a discovery flight in a helicopter, I would, because you've already flown, so I mean, go for it, man. That's all I got to tell you. You would have.
Oh yeah, and,
You got,
and I've been in them a few, because I've scouted for audad out of helicopters before. So no, I know what you mean. I got the bug. Um, it's just honestly, man, if I could justify the cost of it, like you're
Yeah.
saying, I would do it. But with all the other things I got going on in life, like the cost and time, it's kind of tricky for me to swing it. And I don't know, there's not where I live and what I'm doing for a living right now. I don't think I would utilize it a lot, but I can see how people get pumped about it.
Yeah. I think the closest helicopter flight school for you is in between Boulder and Denver, that airport. I can't think of the name of it, but I think,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I think that's one of the closest one, because helicopter flight schools are really hard to find nowadays because the cost. That's the thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah. And
anyways, back to the.
it's
Go ahead.
yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, man. Yeah,
No,
I'll
I
get
was
caught
good.
on this flying stuff and we'll
I
talk
know
about
that's
it
what
forever.
I was, because we're supposed to be talking about your business and helping people and getting people out hunting and stuff. So how far do you normally, when the guys do it yourself, the tent setups, everything, how far back do you normally do you have different spots depending on locations?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. And this might be like people who are interested in this type of hunting, they might be interested in it, interested in like how the whole thing's set up, even if you're hunting on your own and you run into outfitters in wilderness areas or whatever. Like all the wilderness areas in Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, they've all got outfitters in them. I don't know a single wilderness area that doesn't have, some commercial guys in there. So it might be kind of interesting for people to understand how it works. So, and it's a little bit different state by state, but for the most part, the same. So what we have is we're limited by the commercial use days we can have. So how we can only take X amount of hunters every year. And then we have permitted camp locations, right? So like if you're hunting in an area with an outfitter, he probably hunts that same camp every year. So he kind of, like I know where, 95% of the elk that I pack out of, we call these drop camps, like they come out of the same locations. You know what I mean? There's just these hot spots around them. So we know that, and we share that information with the hunters, and all the camps, because they're permitted by the feds, they're in the same areas, and most of them are going to be between 2 hours, horseback ride in, up to like 5 hour horseback ride in. When you get up into Montana, there's a couple wilderness areas where you might get into that 6-7 hour horseback ride in type of range. But everything in Colorado and for the most part across the West is going to be between 2 and 5 hours. And if you want like rough trail distance, because people always ask like, what, riding, how long what's the distance? A rough estimate is if you multiply it by 3. So if it takes you 3 hours to get into a place, it's probably going to be right around 9 miles, 8 to 10 miles in on the trail. So that's what you're looking at.
okay. And then back to, because you stress, you notice a lot of archery elk hunters are really taking serious the health and the fitness aspect, because you do sheep and goats, and they're no joke either. I had Greg McHale, he's up in the Yukon, he hunts the Dow sheep up there, and I mean the terrain he's hunting on, and the dude's freaking running. Like he may I asked him, does he have his camera crew? Does he test them, do fitness tests before? He says everyone on my staff can hang with me. So because he's like hardcore. He's got a show on Carbon TV and all that stuff. And so
Yeah, sure.
do you emphasize the guys? Doesn't matter, elk, sheep, anything. Hey, I would highly suggest you start getting in shape for this hunt, because it's going to be, especially coming from like Texas or New York or a lower
Right.
altitude. Because I'm in great shape. I work out all the time, and I still, those first couple of days, I'm like, huffing and puffing.
Yeah, so the altitude, so unfortunately with altitude, it affects, I'm sure it's just like the genetic diversity amongst us or whatever, but it affects people differently. Even if you hold their fitness level the same, like some people are just heavily affected by it, other people a lot less so. So that's something that everybody's going to have to face. Obviously, the better in shape you can get for these trips, the more you're going to get out of it and the more enjoyment you're going to get out of it. So I do encourage all my hunters to get in as good a shape as possible. For some people, that means, getting in like marathon level endurance strength or further than marathon level endurance strength or whatever. And for some people, that just means losing 25, 30 pounds, right? So I don't, anybody can do the hunts, but the better in shape you are, the more you're going to enjoy it. And I think that's really the key. Yeah, like you're more effective if you can get around and not be exhausted all the time. But the key thing is, particularly when you're dealing with the altitude, if guys haven't put in some effort to be in decent shape, it's just harder for them to enjoy the trip, right? Like the guided hunts are one thing, but the drop camps, people underestimate, drop camps or backpack hunts or whatever, like just all the chores involved in, living in the mountains for a week is hard on guys if they're not used to it. So being in shape makes all that stuff easier and makes it so you got enough energy to go out and enjoy yourself and hunt. Having said that, I always tell guys there's three things that I notice. And then, so outside of these three things, there's just an uncontrollable, unlucky guy who just is really susceptible to altitude sickness and he can get sick randomly. That's really rare. Like that's for me, that's probably one out of 300 type of hunter. But the other guys that get sick, there's basically three things they do. One, they'll drink booze in the first 48 hours or whatever. Try to avoid that. Okay. Cause getting run down the first 48 hours, even if you're coming up here for a backpack hunt, you stay at a hotel in one of these high elevation towns or whatever, don't go out and get shit faced the first night you're up in the mountains, because it's hard for your body to recover. The second thing is just try to stay hydrated, as much as you can. And then the third thing, and this is the one that always catches the guys that are in really good shape and have been, preparing intensely for these trips, and it gets them, is when you first get up in the mountains, don't go out and get exhausted. Like I've had a lot of guys, you get them into camp, and instead of just relaxing, acclimating, doing some camp chore stuff, getting your firewood set up, kind of setting up camp, they'll go out. I mean, there's 2 hours of light left, and they'll go out and hike 11 miles at altitude. And it doesn't matter how good a shape you're in, that can get you run down where you never recover. So if you do those three things, your chances of like a down and out, like ruin your trip altitude issue is pretty damn limited.
It's funny you mentioned that, because then the physical aspect you got to all take care of, but if you're not having fun, that mental aspect comes in. And because as you were talking about that, I started thinking, I remember, because I used to coach at the University of Colorado, and I was assistant strength coach for the football team. And in Ward, they would always put up a sign in the visitors' locker room, the elevation. They would make a point, you're at 5,300, I think it was like 80 feet or 20 feet or something in Boulder. And it was funny to watch when the visiting team was competing and it was a good game, they were in it, but if we were beating somebody and these guys are top level athletes, great shape, they'd be sitting on the sidelines and just like, they'd have the oxygen mask on. They'd be like sitting heads down, just, you can tell they were exhausted. And I think that mental, just that right there, if you want to have fun, you got to prepare yourself physically like I said, if you go out and hike 11 miles and then come back and you just got there, you're going to be exhausted, and it's just going to F with your head, and you won't, that recovery. So mentally, you need to be prepared too.
Yeah. And the mental thing is huge. I mean, it's kind of cliche to talk about, David, but it's huge. I mean, I see it amongst my hunters all the time. I mean, mind is it's a crazy powerful, because I notice it now. Like, if I'm guiding like a backpack sheep hunt or something and things are going tough, like we're 4 days in and it's like a grind, you can you get that feeling of like your brain, I don't know what it is, it's hormones or chemistry or lack of sleep or whatever, but your brain will start telling you like, man, we got to get the hell out of here. You know what I mean? Like we got to get back home where it's warm and all that. And it's weird, because if you're not conscious of it, it'll take you over, and you will start trying to figure out a way to quit, and it's amazing to me because I'll sense it sometimes, like even after all the hunts I've guided, like I'll sense that feeling, be like, oh, that's what that is, dude. It's like just something about my brain chemistry or whatever is telling me like I got to get the fuck out of here, and go relax somewhere, and you got to just fight that for a little bit, and then it'll get better, and you'll keep trudging along.
Have you had hunters that like ones that come from lower elevation? They're in pretty decent shape, but mentally the hunt's going hard. You've seen maybe one or two animals, or maybe nothing at all. It's like day 2 or 3. And have you had to like almost give them a pep talk? Man, we got to get after it. You can't give up. And have you had guys kind of?
Oh yeah, for
quit?
sure. Yeah. That's, in these, depending on the type of hunting you're doing, but like the rugged, backpack hunts in particular, but the elk hunt stuff, that's like, in my mind, that's like 30% of the job of being a guide is being a cheerleader. You know what I mean? Like you cannot, if you're a guide on tough hunts and everybody knows they're going to be tough, you cannot have negativity. That's like period. You know what I mean? Because like that thing's negativity, is a fucking disease in the mountains. You know what I mean? And it'll go from you to your clients like almost immediately. So yeah, you're gonna have like some trying times as a guide on the tougher hunts, but you got to keep that shit to yourself because it'll spread like wildfire. And that's like I always tell guys in these drop camps, because it's usually groups of guys. It's, it's guys that are buddies from work or families or whatever. When the guys are putting together the groups, 3 to 5 guys or whatever, I always tell them like, hey man, just realize that like who you choose to put together in your group makes a big difference. Because it's it's a weakest link thing. If you got one guy in there that's gonna go negative and start bitching and whining, he'll ruin the whole fucking trip. You got to be really careful about who you have in there, and you got to have some positivity. It's amazing how I feel like we're going like real woo woo on this, David, but these things are,
hey,
they're
happens.
important.
It's real. It's real. Cause guys just get all
excited about for sure
planning that trip, and then you get out those mountains. It's like, fuck, man, this doesn't look anything like Google Map or Google Earth. These are here, man, you see it. I've had so many times that doing e-scouting and I'm planning, and you get there and you're like, what? I thought I was going to climb that part, but I don't see it happening now. It's a grind mentally. It really messes with you. How about, so when sheep hunting and goat hunting's got to be pretty tough, right? Like, cause you're talking animals that can hang out on cliff edges, and you got to get after them.
Yeah. So, they're two pretty different species, David. I would say, so sheep, depending on how much they're hunted, you have to be capable in the high elevations. Most of the units in Colorado, you're going to hunt them above timberline 80% of the time, if not more. So you got to be comfortable with that component of it. But in a lot of ways, because the tags are so limited, sheep they're not quite as skittish, or, I would say, their tendency to avoid hunters is not up to the par of like over the counter elk or something like that. They're actually, in a general sense, kind of dumber than elk that are hunted a whole lot. But they're different species, so you got to learn about them, kind of understand, how they work in order to hunt them. But they're not more difficult than heavily pressured deer or elk. It's just the altitude is another step up. Goats, on the other hand, anybody who's hunted them a fair amount and who's hunted other species, goats are actually fairly dumb. And I say that not as like a derogatory term towards the species, because they're probably my favorite species, but they've developed in a way where predators is not a thing to them. Like if they see something that's threatening, they just walk up the rocks where something can't get them. You know what I mean? Yeah. So they don't have a lot of that intuitive the intuitive senses that the other game animals we hunt do. They're fairly forgiving about a lot of different things. The only thing is they live in crazy terrain. You know what I mean? Like you have to be goats, because they depend on that nasty terrain to avoid predators. You have to be comfortable going up there into that terrain. And so I would say a goat hunt is unique in the sense that it's more about kind of the mountaineering expedition part of it than it is about like fooling the species. 90% of goat hunting is knowing a little bit about the species, knowing where the billies are going to hang out, that sort of thing. And then the rest is all about your ability to get up there near them, you know. And goat hunting is for sure, that's the one hunting that I've done that I've probably been closest to death, for sure. Just because if every goat hunt, there's going to be at one point during that hunt that if you happen to fall at that moment, you're going to die. So that, you know what I mean? Like that's just to give you a sense of the terrain. But a really unique species.
Has anyone ever tried to bow hunt them? Have you seen anyone try and bow hunt a goat or a sheep?
Sorry, what's that?
Has anyone tried to bow hunt
Yeah,
them?
so goats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you. And sorry, David, it was breaking up a little bit. But yeah, so goats are fairly, I think goats are a pretty good bow hunt, because if you can get around their terrain and you feel comfortable in that nasty stuff, they're forgiving enough that you can usually close the distance. Sheep are pretty tough to bow hunt, in my opinion, in Colorado, because usually they're above timberline. I've never guided a sheep bow hunt. I have guided goat bow hunts. But sheep bow hunts, I mean, I'm not saying guys can't do it, but it's a guy's taking on like a serious challenge.
And since they're limited tags, do you get those tags and someone pays for it through you through your outfitter, or how does that work? Or do they just hire you? Say, hey, listen, I drew this tag for bighorn sheep, and I'd like you to take me out and hunt them. Is that how it works, or how's it work?
Yeah, so every state's a little bit different. Colorado is very much the hunt has like a kind of a hunter centric policy, in the sense that they draw the tags. All the tags are between the hunters and the state. The outfitters in the state, with very little exception, there is a landowner program, that sort of thing. But for the most part, the hunter has the tag, and then he goes and hires a guide to help him if he chooses to. But outfitters don't have any control over the tags in Colorado.
Also, something else to note about you is that you're a scorer for Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett, correct? A measuring
Yeah,
score.
I am.
So if
Sure.
guys are looking for trophy animals, that's one thing that you can do is you can spot an animal and say, hey, this is what you're looking for, or I've been watching this animal before they get in, and you know that he's the kind of bull or ram or mule deer buck that they're looking for.
Right. And honestly, David, like I guide guys that are all over the spectrum, you know, very focused on trophy quality, and then guys who don't care. It's 100% about the experience. And personally, I'm like probably somewhere in between. You know what I mean? The experience, it matters a whole lot more to me than how big the ram is or elk or whatever. But I do think it's a valuable skill set to be able to manage people's expectation. Like, hey, like that's a good one. Like you should really consider that one. Like we've worked hard. That's a good one for this unit. For me, you know, the scoring, you know, and going through the classes for both Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett, it's really been about having that skill set. I don't care about people's personal choices, what they choose to harvest. I mean, I shouldn't say that universally, because there are, you know, I like it when people, you know, harvest mature animals. It's probably a little bit better for the areas that I hunt or whatever. But beyond that, I don't have a judgment on it. But I do want to be able to make sure I can tell them, you know, that's roughly this score or whatever, just so guys know.
Have you ever been out with a hunter and you see one, and then you're like, he's not out for a trophy, but you see this animal and you're like, holy shit, where did he come from? I've never, just one that was just like, wow. Have you ever seen one that you hadn't seen, or just the guy wasn't expecting, and then all of a sudden here's this giant that you're like, oh my God,
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I honestly, David, like probably over the years of outfitting, like the most outstanding animals that were harvested were harvested by guys that wasn't their goal. You know what I mean? They consistently came and they got that opportunity and killed it. Like the biggest mule deer we've ever harvested was harvested by a guy. He hunted with me several times. I'd never seen the deer before. Nobody in the area had seen the deer before. But he got the opportunity and killed the deer. Now, he totally appreciated the size of the deer. The deer was huge. It's like a 230-inch plus type of deer, like, a multiple lifetime type of deer. But he appreciated it for what it was. But if he would have killed the deer half the size, he would have been happy too.
He's happy, yeah.
So, yeah, that happens all the time.
And oh, what was I gonna? Oh my God, I keep on forgetting what the hell I was gonna talk. Oh, wintertime. So what do you do? Do people fly fish in winter? Do you guide fly fishing trips in the wintertime too, or what do you do mainly in the winter?
So in terms of services, we don't offer much in the winter. It's kind of our off season. So we do all of our booking, and we have 4-month off season. We kind of we'll start fishing like mid-May, and then we go through the end of November for hunting.
Can people, when they do the do-it-yourself hunts, can they rent? Do you have where they can rent horses? So if you leave them back there, they'll have some horses, or no? Can they rent horses with you?
Yeah, so we don't do that, and I'd say probably in the Mountain West, there's very few guys that do that, just because the guys have to have a certain level of competency with horses to be safe on the horse's behalf and their behalf. So most guys find that if they haven't used them a lot, they're kind of a negative to have in camp. They're great for getting back in there, you know what I mean, and getting elk out in particular. But most people, they might think they want them in there, but they're better off without them. So you don't see that. There's one big company in Colorado that rents horses to people. They don't do any outfitting, but they do rent horses to folks. And some guys enjoy that. I think after a few years of doing it, where they know what they're getting into. Other guys have a terrible time with it. So it just depends on if you want to take on that, learning that skill set.
Yeah, I've looked into it when I was going to hunt Montana. I was going to take horse riding lessons here and everything, and it is, you know how to handle horse. Then on top of it, you got to feed and water them, all the things in the back country too.
Oh yeah.
They're working them themselves.
I mean, I hate to say it, David, because it's like it's within like the outfitting community or horse and mule guys. Guys always shit on them, but llamas, for like a do-it-yourself guy, llamas are a better option.
I was going to ask about that.
They can't, like, very hard for them to hurt you, and they're easy to take care of. You know what I mean? They can't pack the weight in that sort of thing that a horse can, but they have a much shallower learning curve, and they're just better for like a do-it-yourself guy. I'm trying to think of like an analogy. I mean, it's like a llama would be like, if you're going to move, a llama's like renting a U-Haul truck that everybody can drive, instead of like, getting an 18-wheeler to move with, and you're going to drive it the first day. That's more like what renting horses and mules is, right? Like, it's like way over most guys, just because they're not exposed to them.
Yeah, it's not cheap either. When I was looking at Montana, I forget, it was like, I'm just gonna say offhand, it's like $75 a day, maybe somewhere in that ballpark.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. So if I was gonna rent them for a week, that's, and then you got to budget your money. Your hunting trip's already expensive itself because you're non-resident. and you're trying to get horses.
Yeah.
It's like, fuck me.
Yeah. No, you're better. You're better off backpacking it or llamas or whatever.
Cool. So springtime's the fly fishing, which I love. I love, especially in the mountains. Beautiful fly fish. And then so do
Okay.
you when do you usually start scouting for guys? Because elk, they're moving and stuff. Do you have certain areas they'll always be come that fall? So that's why you chose those locations where you're gonna hunt them? Pretty much. I mean, because you've been doing this for a while, so I'm sure you're familiar with all the animals you hunt.
Yeah, sure. So in the summer and then into like August, when we start spending a lot of time in putting all of our camps in, we're up there a lot. So we generally have a sense of what's in the area. But the reality is like the mountain species, elk and deer that are living in what I would call like a fairly deep elevation grade. So our elk go all the way up to 12,000 in the summer, and then they're wintering, down here at 6,500 feet or whatever. The challenge is not like, you're not going to find them in the summer and go back and kill one during first rifle season in the same spot. Generally, the key to elk and deer hunting in this type of area is you got to know historically under what conditions where they show up. You know what I mean? That's the key to it. So I'm not saying there's no value in summer scouting, but there's a lot of value in hunting an area year after year under different conditions, right? Because sometimes third rifle season, the snow and the temperatures and all of that, one year it can be like this, and then the next year you can come back during first rifle season and you can have those same conditions, and you can think to yourself, oh, I remember where they were at when we had this much snow and all of that the last time I hunted here, even though it was during third season. And you're generally going to find game in the same spot when those same conditions are around. Does that make any sense?
Yeah. I know.
Yeah,
Like I said, I figured you'd know because you've been doing this for so long that you're not going to put people. Oh, I think they're here. You're not going to tell someone.
Yeah.
Go over there. I think I see them over there. Yeah. So you're familiar with where these animals will be, times of year and stuff. So, well, listen.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on. I don't want to cut it short, but
yeah.
Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it because I want to get the word out, because the fly fishing season's coming up for you and stuff. And
sure.
And it's cool you're doing because I know a lot of people are really into the going out west, and you can provide that service for them. So let's get the word out. And plus, your first responder wilderness, a safe pilot is not going to take people up and do crazy things, and personal trainer, and he's going to make sure you guys have a safe trip. So, give out all your information, like your Instagram and your websites, all that stuff, so people can find you.
Yeah, sure. So the two best ways, man, are the website, ftguides.com, and then my Instagram. There's my personal one's probably the best, and that's Cliff GRY. And then I do have a Flat Tops Wilderness Guides Instagram too. So yeah, people can follow me on there and see what we're up to and contact me that way too. So yeah, man, thanks for having me.
So it's Cliff GRY for
yeah.
Oh, mine's okay. Cool. I just want to make sure I heard that right. Okay.
I don't know.
Right,
yeah,
cool.
I mean, I've had this question before. I don't know, man, but I'm going with it at this point. So it's Cliff GRY. There's no A in the end.
Yeah. Well, I figured that probably the gray was taken right away. So, okay, that's cool. Yeah. I just want to make sure I heard it right so people can hear. So it's Cliff GRY. There's no
yeah.
A. Okay. All right, Cliff. Hey, thanks for coming on. And I'll get this out ASAP. I'm trying to get all my podcasts, and plus, your business. I want to get in time for business pickup stuff. So I'll get this out.
Yeah, of course, man.
For you. All right, man.
Yeah. Good luck. Good luck on everything.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
All right, you too, man. See ya.
Bye.